Trump does not give a toss about the Palestinians or whatever they think has happened to their homeland.
There is always that aspect too of what Donald Trump does, which is just to get people's hair on fire because they feel so aggravated by a lot of what he does. Do you concentrate on a piss-take video like that, which is pretty offensive, probably inconsequential? Or do you do the stuff that he's doing about Ukraine? Whether it be the Trump video from Gaza, the futuristic Gaza, or whether it be Steve Bannon, or whether it be Elon Musk's 5 bullet points, it does tell you something about where America is going.
There's some really serious stuff that's going on, which is incredibly chilling. Before you watch today's episode, we want to remind you that tickets are on sale for the newsagent's live shows with HSBC UK. We're kicking off our tour at Birmingham Symphony Hall on February the 17th. Then we're off to the Bridgewater Hall in Manchester, that's on February the 24th. And finally to Usher Hall in Edinburgh on March the 11th. Head over to Global Player to get your tickets for any of those dates. The link will be in the description below. We're really excited to see you there.
On all your favourite TV series, they say previously on 24, previously on the West Wing. Well, a week in the West Wing right now is a very, very long time.
Well, we are the federal law. You better do it because you're not going to get any federal funding at all if you don't.
If you have a target, that target's right here. It's not the men and women at the FBI.
Who has elections?
Germany.
Oh, Germany. I wish them luck.
And this is the responsibility of Russia because the aggressor is Russia.
Europe is loaning the money to Ukraine. They get their money back.
No, in fact, to be frank, we paid.
House Democrats will not provide a single vote to this reckless Republican budget. Not one.
Elon Musk is telling the workers to provide a 5-bullet-point list of their accomplishments or resign.
Well, we're talking about the death of a constitutional republic.
The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Air Force General C.Q. Brown, is now out of his job.
Zelensky a dictator. Would you use the same words regarding Putin?
I don't use those words lightly.
Unthinkable just a few weeks ago, the U.S. voted against a UN General Assembly resolution supporting Ukraine. Joined in their no vote North Korea, Hungary, and Belarus.
Donald Trump has tapped a podcaster and right-wing media personality who once said this, quote, "My entire life right now is owning the libs." That person is named Dan Bongino.
And I'm not leaving until we fix this shit.
From Gaza, shining bright, a golden future, a brand new light. Taste and taste the deal is done.
We are working in dog years now. Donald Trump's only been in power 5 weeks. It feels like a decade. So before we do anything else, we're going to bring you up to date with what has just happened. Welcome to the Newsagents USA.
The Newsagents USA.
It's John.
It's Emily.
What a week. And if the music bed comes from the latest video that Donald Trump has put out on Truth Social, which is his vision of Gaza. And it starts with 2 little kids walking through the rubble of what is Gaza today, but it very quickly becomes all gilt, all gold. It is Trump Gaza, and there are beautiful fountains and big hotels and swimming pools, and the final shot is of Benjamin Netanyahu on a sun lounger. Next to him is Donald Trump, and they are sipping cocktails.
What are they not? Palestinians. There are no Palestinians in the video. The Palestinians in this version of Donald Trump's Gaza have gone, left, unspecified. I don't think they're living in the gold condos. But I guess what Trump is doing here is, and the whole video is so kind of weirdy, mind-blowing, soft focus. It's like the kind of travel promo that you see when a plane lands somewhere slightly dodgy and you're kind of doing a sort of welcome to
it's the video on a loop. It's the video on a loop that is played in your hotel room at the airport while you're waiting for your baggage.
Yeah, exactly right. And I guess somewhere in this video there is a really serious message, which is, Trump does not give a toss about the Palestinians or whatever they think has happened to their homeland. But it is aspirational. The kids that are walking through the rubble at the beginning are then carrying gold balloons with Trump's face on it. Now, obviously, this is just the work of a massive narcissist. He didn't make the video, but he has posted it himself on his own Truth Social site. And I think somewhere in it you have to work out who it's talking to, because it's basically aimed at Saudi money, at Qatari money, at presumably Israeli and American money, all the people who actually do think like Trump at the moment, who are seeing that extraordinary stretch of Mediterranean beach, and instead of seeing the rubble and the homeland and the political devastation, they're kind of thinking, oh yeah, how long would that take with a bulldozer just to clear away? And I think he's speaking to aspirational investors. And I don't know if that makes it better or worse, but somehow he is tapping into something. We use this word transactional the whole time, but he's tapping into something which is, you want to pay money into this place that no one has spent money on for decades.
Well, look, the one group of people he's not talking to are the Palestinians, who just want to rebuild their homeland, and, you know, who already once lived in what is now Israel, but are now largely concentrated in the Gaza Strip, who feel that they've been moved once and they can see something else happening as well, which they don't much like. I think the other group he is talking to is us. He is talking to liberals to enrage them, to troll them, to kind of take the mickey. There is always that aspect too of what Donald Trump does, which is just to get people's hair on fire because they feel so aggravated by a lot of what he does. But, you know, the thing that I find covering Donald Trump, and I found it for 4 years and I'm finding it again now, is there are so many different things that are going on in different directions that you don't know what to concentrate on. Do you concentrate on a piss take video like that, which is pretty offensive, probably inconsequential? Or do you do the stuff that he's doing about Ukraine? The fact that the US is voting in the UN with Russia and North Korea to knock down a resolution that blames Russia for the conflict in Ukraine. That seems to me big potatoes.
Yeah, and even China and Iran abstained on that one. They did not vote, whereas the USA, the United States of America, voted with Eritrea, Belarus and North Korea to refuse to condemn Russian violence. Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether that was a statement about the UN or just trying to, as you'd say, provoke people into understanding that the American position on the world stage has fundamentally shifted now. And that's what we're learning. As we're recording, we're waiting to see if Zelensky signs off mineral rights in Ukraine. But I think it's also important to bring you up to date with what's happening at home, because it's quite easy to get swept away with what Trump does on the world stage, because he does it all on the world stage all at once. And yet at home, there's some really serious, and by home I mean America, there's some really serious stuff that's going on, which is incredibly chilling.
Yeah, again, let's try and divide between trolling and serious.
Yeah.
So Elon Musk writing to federal staff, tell me what you did last week, I want 5 bullet points, otherwise you may be fired, is broadly trolling, and it gets a lot of headlines, but there is some real serious going on as well that is happening to the federal workforce in the United States, where they feel, I am no longer an employee of the United States of America upholding the US Constitution. Yeah. I am an employee of Donald Trump. And unless I do exactly what he says, then I'm in serious trouble.
I think that's really important, because it's not the bullet points, you know, and you'll see a lot of people saying, oh, what's wrong with asking workers what they did, or what's wrong with asking people to justify what they're doing at work or what they're getting paid for. It is sinister what's going on, because it is creating an atmosphere, and I know this because I've talked personally to people who are federal employees in the USA, and they report to us. I mean, they won't even use, they're talking on Signal now because they don't trust their WhatsApps, they don't trust their emails, they don't trust anything government operated, and they're telling us that there's an email whereby employees are being asked to report on other employees. If you've seen Severance, it sort of enters into the world of, you know, the white corridors here, where different workers are being asked to essentially spy on their peers, on their co-workers, to tell them whether they've literally got the memo. And some of the stuff that's changing now is what they ever want to reveal. Because before, the whole idea of your work within government for the US government was that you trusted the person on the end of the email. And this person told me they don't trust them anymore. They don't want to give away secrets. They don't want to tell people what's actually happening. They don't even want to write down the bullet points for fear that they are compromising something that is important to national security.
So something else we just played you in the in that montage at the top of the show. And again, I would class this as serious, not trolling. The fact of the matter is, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the most senior military officer in the United States, has just been fired because, why? Well, because he was part of the Biden administration. You are clearing out people whose service is to the United States, who would typically carry on and see out their term as chairman of the Joint Chiefs. And the heads of the various militaries, the Air Force, Army, Navy, have also gone as well. You've seen the takeover of the FBI. And I saw Donald Trump signing an executive order the other day which authorises the investigation into law firms that assisted Jack Smith's investigation into, Donald Trump's misuse of classified materials and his involvement on January the 6th. So law firms that were duly engaged by the Ministry of Justice to assist on a federal investigation now find themselves under investigation themselves. If that isn't revenge, if that isn't vengeance, what is?
Well, what it is as well, I think, is an attempt to remove people that they don't particularly want to see promoted. I mean, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff was a black man who Pete Hegseth, the defence secretary, went after as a woke general. His words, not mine. What had the Joint Chiefs of Staff done? He had been part of a video that promoted the armed services for all kinds of Americans, for Latino Americans, for black Americans, for women. And this basically led Pete Hegseth to accuse him of being a woke general. In other words, somebody who was talking about race at a time when they shouldn't have been. Now, there are two ways of seeing this. One is that you just want your generals to be lethal, or you want them to be authoritative and you don't want them to talk about anything else. Okay, you think about that. Maybe that's one area. But there are people now, James Clyburn, who is a very prominent African American, who believe that Charles Brown, the Joint Chief of Staff, was fired because of his skin colour. He was fired because he was a black general in what is now an administration that does not have much truck with people of colour.
And of course, the irony of that is you might not like people who are black at the top of your armed forces, but if you strip black people out of the armed forces and Latinos out of the armed forces, the US doesn't have much armed forces left, because most of the recruitment does come from areas where there's large concentrations of, African Americans. And so the idea that you can't have a black head as the head of the Joint Chiefs is absurd.
I mean, look, they would deny this. Obviously, they'd say, are you kidding? We've had a much bigger percentage of the African-American vote, the black vote in the last election. What are you doing talking about racism when we're just talking about the right personnel for the job? I just think that there is a nervousness right now that what we are seeing in America is the start of what some people are calling resegregation. In other words, this is taking us back to the 1960s. It is a pre-civil rights era where actually you've heard all the complaints from people who are saying, why are they taking our jobs? Why is she taking our jobs? Why are they taking our jobs? And this goes to the heart of it, that people are scared that America has changed, the whole kind of sepia tinted nostalgia. America's changed. Can't it just go back to the way it was when the white guys were in charge?
I mean, look, the striking thing about all of this, and again, the theme of what we've tried to do in this episode is just to take you through the last week and what is signified by the last week. This is just 7 days we're talking about of utter madness, and you look at it on the international stage where, tomorrow we think that President Zelensky, on Friday, we think that President Zelensky is going to be at the White House signing some minerals deal which hands over half of Ukraine's mineral wealth to the US as, well, we don't know what. We don't know what Zelensky's getting in return for this. Maybe not very much at all. Maybe Donald Trump has realised, to use his phrase, that he hasn't got any cards. And Donald Trump is forcing this on Zelensky.
And we shouldn't skip over the fact that there is now a podcaster in charge of a government department, second in command, at the FBI. His name is Dan Bongino. And you heard a little clip there of the things that he said in the past. His whole life's effort is in owning the libs.
Owning the libs
Yeah.
and draining the putrid swamp.
Yeah.
And so owning the libs means, I want to own the Liberals. I want to destroy the Liberals. He is now the number 2 at the FBI.
Yeah. And I think we've skirted rather quickly over CPAC as well, where Steve Bannon rather tentatively, weirdly, nervously did a Sieg Heil salute for reasons that no one's bothered to explain or check or justify, really.
Because, again, is that trolling or is that serious? Now, a lot of people will be offended just by the sight of someone doing that, but I think that falls into the trolling category and probably shouldn't detain ourselves too much on what Steve Bannon has just done. But as a general indicator of direction of travel, whether it be the Trump video from Gaza, the futuristic Gaza, or whether it be Steve Bannon, or whether it be Elon Musk's 5 bullet points, it does tell you something about where America is going.
Well, in a moment, we're going to be talking to a man, the author of Fantasyland and Evil Geniuses, who believes that America has a particular susceptibility to myths, to conspiracy, to fantasy, and how Trump fits in to what America was already like. That's coming up with Kurt Andersen. We're going to speak to Kurt Andersen, and Kurt has written books. One's called Fantasyland and one is Evil Geniuses. And we talked, I'm thinking back, nearly a decade ago, Kurt, about Fantasyland because you set the scene for an America that was particularly vulnerable, particularly susceptible to believing in conspiracy, make-believe, witchcraft. And this was written before Trump was actually on the scene or before he had won the presidency. And it does seem to me an important voice to have back on understanding why America is kind of being taken in again by a lot of stuff that is patently untrue. We're going to start, if we can, by playing you Trump's Gaza video that he posted on his site overnight.
Donald's coming to set you free, bringing the light for all to see. No more tunnels, no more fear. Trump Gaza is finally here. Trump Gaza shining bright, golden future, a brand new light. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza, number 1. Trump Gaza shining bright, golden future, a brand new light. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza, number 1.
Part of my theory of the case is that America has always turned everything it can into a kind of show business. Well, there you go. This AI video about Gaza, this place where 47,000 people have been killed in the last year and a half, into a Miami Beach, Hawaiian Island resort in his overweight beach chair, ogling a voluptuous woman, all the whole thing, dollars floating around, it's just, it's grotesque. And, another phrase I've been using for some years now, since he was first president, was calling him the greatest self-parodist of all time, Donald Trump. And this is, again, it's one more case in which reality outruns satire and the ability to satirize things, because there it is. It's and the idea, of course, that this is going to happen to Gaza is a fantasy beyond fantasy.
You don't think it ever will?
I do not.
What is the motivation in producing this AI video? Is it to troll people like you, to people like us? Is it to suggest that there is this fantasy land that could be had? Is it just to cause offence? Because presumably if you're Palestinian and you're living on a pile of rubble and you're wondering when my home is going to be rebuilt and when my life gets rebuilt, you're not feeling too great about the idea that you've got no place in this sunny playground of the future.
All of that. I mean, and so much of his behavior and his and again in the 37 days or whatever that he's been president this time, is about doing some surprise to keep the show, the Trump show, interesting to people, to us, horrified maybe, but interested, right? And so that's a big part of everything he does, and often, and more, but always, that's a matter of what outrage can I do today? And so that's definitely part of it. But he also has this Donald Trump real estate developer show business mixed with real estate, which he said was his dream when he was 18 years old, that he was going to merge show business and real estate development. Turning this war zone, this where he wants to displace a population of 2 million Palestinians, into just a fantastic libertine resort with strippers and casinos, and branded by Donald Trump. So of course you get the corruption aspect too. A friend of mine last night at dinner was saying, "Oh, I've got the 3 C's to talk about Donald Trump from now on. It's chaos, cruelty, and corruption." On the one hand, what a bizarre surprise, but of course it's not. It's exactly the Trump playbook of the last, at this point, what is it? 9 years, 10 years.
Kurt, you've argued that there is something sort of particular or peculiar to the American psyche, right from the sort of, Puritan landings 500 years ago, that makes your nation, that nation, much more open to myth and fantasy and conspiracy. What is it?
So I began this investigation in this book thinking, how did we get here? And how has it changed as much as it had in my lifetime? I was born in the 1950s. And it wasn't that way. It didn't seem that way to me growing up in the middle of the country in the 60s and 70s. But so how did this happen? And I have a long history, as you know. But as you say, it begins with these English nutters, basically, who either thought they would create a new Zion in this new world where they'd never been and had only read about and dreamed about, and another faction in Virginia who thought they were going to all get rich overnight by finding gold and silver in the streets because it's El Dorado, right? So those are the initial people, the kind of cult extremists who couldn't get along with other Puritans in England and even couldn't manage in the Netherlands either. So they came into this empty place, empty except for the Indians with whom they didn't get along. It was always about attracting, in the kind of first global media advertising marketing campaign, because of course these were colonies that kings of England were investing in. How do we get people here? We need to get colonists. We need to get people in here. So we advertise it as this utopian paradise. And so the initial generations of people who came here for their various reasons of meeting God or getting rich, were self-selected for suckers.
But
to put it simply.
Okay, can I turn that on its head and say it's about optimism? It's about looking for a dream and not being scared to go and find it.
100%. And again, that has been this dynamic that made America, before it was the United States, and the United States since it was the United States, great, right? It was because that is the good side of this, and had an establishment, if you will, and gatekeepers and all the rest who kept the nuts and the destructive extremes of these inclinations to believe in the impossible in check. And that was, and that worked pretty well for a couple 300 years until it didn't.
So are we saying now that the lunatics have taken over the asylum? You look at the Republicans in Congress who don't want to say a boo to Donald Trump under any circumstances. You look at some of the people in the new administration, the sort of the pimply Praetorian guard of Elon Musk going and telling which people can stay in federal jobs and which can't.
There were stops along the way in the evolution from the 17th century. And the show businessification of everything especially starting in the 19th century, especially of religion in this country, which of course was 200 years ago and remains the most religious developed country on earth. And then you had, which was not a uniquely American thing, but of course, well, you had two things. You had the 60s and 70s where my truth is my truth and, believe whatever you want and this crazy thing can be true and that crazy thing, I'm not going to judge that. And that scaling up to become the kind of cultural norm. And then the internet, which again, double-edged sword, provides wonderful access to all information to everyone freely, so on and so forth, and provides an infrastructure for untruths and lies and fakery and charlatanism that looks as real as the real.
You've got a man who is quite open to medical conspiracy, now in charge of America's health department. He's a man who dealt you coke in your student days.
The one time I bought cocaine in my life was when I was 18 years old, a freshman in college. And he was the celebrity of our class at Harvard. And, I never tried cocaine. And I heard, Bobby Kennedy's a cocaine dealer. And also, wouldn't that be fun to buy a gram of cocaine with my roommate for $40 from Bobby Kennedy? And so it was. But I wasn't going to write about this. But then when he decided to announce his endorsement of Donald Trump, I said, this is beyond. I mean, turning on his fathers and uncles and family's liberal legacy of 60 years and his own life as an environmental activist and lawyer and everything in order to get power and pursue his falsehood based notion of the health system and health. I used the fact that he was in addition to being an addict, which we all know and he'd been reported for 14 years, a heroin addict, that he was also a dealer of cocaine, in my amusing little anecdote of buying it from him. Because one of Donald Trump's lesser known but constant refrains in his campaign this time and last time were that all drug dealers in the United States should be subject to special expedited trials, like they do in China, he says, and executed. So I was thinking, interesting. So he would have executed you at 18, 19, I guess, wouldn't he? And I just used that as the basis for a short piece about that story.
Tell us what happened. Tell us what happened when you went to buy coke off a fellow student, RFK Jr.
Went there with a friend, and he said, "Sure, fine." And here's my weed. Opened up his backgammon case, which was full of, a pound of marijuana. And his brother, Joseph Kennedy, the Jr., third, I guess, who later became a congressman, was there as well. And then he had to go and get his cocaine wherever he kept it, apart from his room. And I guess went with his brother. And there was my friend and I alone. And we're just, because we were nosy little 18-year-olds, looked in his address book. This is the part I haven't told before. And there were, Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, and wow, this Kennedy and that Kennedy, and our favorite, Pope Paul VI. And so we jotted those down and prankishly used them later. But anyway, so bought the cocaine, went back to our dorm room, and 10, 15 minutes later, I get a call from Bobby Kennedy saying, "You took my straw, man." I said, "What?" And apparently I had, because I was a novice at this, had taken his little piece of plastic drinking straw with which he had allowed me to sample his cocaine. And instead of putting it back down, this precious object, I had stuck it in my pocket and left. What did I know? But he said, "There's crystals growing in it. Bring it back." And so I did. And he was a jerk and took his straw. And that was the end of my... I would see him around college, and I would see him around during my life in New York. But that was the extent of my relationship with the new Health and Human Services Secretary.
But I suppose that the argument would be today in this crazy world of redemption, and that was then, it was the kind of misspent youth, and look at me now, I'm a responsible, upstanding citizen.
If he had pursued what he was pursuing, which is to say a normal career as an activist, liberal, environmental lawyer, and so forth, instead of deciding that he would commit to this article of faith in 2000 that children's vaccines caused autism, which was not true, which was shown to be not true, which the one British doctor's study that led to that widespread belief was retracted. But there was the internet booming at the same time suddenly that allowed this nonsense to spread, and he became its head and said these outrageous things about how pediatricians should be put in prison if they give vaccines, and on and on and on. And so that's who he is. And so, yeah, sure, don't find that he sold drugs, find that he's a drug addict. I did drugs, lots of people did drugs. He's a bad guy who, because he's from the left of a sort, gives a certain credence and widens the MAGA tent to Californians, let's say, like Bobby Kennedy.
It's all about the plastic straw nowadays.
Well, I want to do an investigation about Pope Paul VI now. I mean, how many drug dealers' contacts books have got a pope in them?
There you go. Well, let's sell that show to somebody. Yeah.
Kurt Andersen, fantastic to speak to you. Thanks so much for joining us here on the News Agency USA.
My total pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks. Before we go, I think we probably need to talk about what's happening to the press and the media a little bit in the US. Some of it looks like censorship. Some of it, arguably much worse, looks like self-censorship. This is Jeff Bezos, obviously the Amazon owner, the man who also owns the Washington Post. And he's sharing a note with the Washington Post team that reads as follows. I'm writing to let you know about a change coming to our opinion pages. We're going to be writing every day in support and defence of two pillars, personal liberties and free markets. We'll cover other topics too, of course, but viewpoints opposing those pillars will be left to be published by others.
So the idea that a newspaper was going to give a plurality of views seems to be gone. Yeah. It seems to be you will write this and for this, or you will write nothing for the Washington Post. And it comes as part of a ratchet where there's been enormous dissent at the Post, which is one of the most iconic newspapers.
With the most iconic tagline, Democracy Dies in Darkness.
And it is changing. And it is changing in this new Trump world. And there are so many other aspects of it. And, just down the road from where the Washington Post is based on K Street in Washington, you have on Pennsylvania Avenue in the White House, the White House press secretary effectively trying to take control over who will ever get to question the president in future. Because what was once the preserve of the White House Correspondents Association, of which I was a member, where, you would decide who would be part of the pool that would travel with the president, who would decide who would go into the Oval Office. It is now going to be the White House that decides this. And this was Caroline Leavitt announcing it from the podium in the briefing room yesterday.
As you all know, for decades, a group of DC-based journalists, the White House Correspondents Association, has long dictated which journalists get to ask questions of the President of the United States in these most intimate spaces. Not anymore. I am proud to announce that we are going to give the power back to the people who read your papers, who watch your television shows, and who listen to your radio stations. Moving forward, the White House press pool will be determined by the White House press team. Legacy outlets who have participated in the press pool for decades will still be allowed to join, fear not, but we will also be offering the privilege to well-deserving outlets who have never been allowed to share in this awesome responsibility. Just like we added a new media seat.
This might sound small beer, but honestly, the idea that the White House is going to choose which journalists will have the privilege to question the president, either in the Oval Office or when he gets on Air Force One or whatever it happens to be, means that if you don't like that particular journalist, they're never going to be approved to be part of the pool, the travelling pool, which goes wherever the president goes, or the in-house pool, which stays in the White House and goes into the Oval Office when there's something going on. And that means that you can ensure that you only get friendly press there. Now, she said, legacy media will still be part of it.
Yeah.
We'll see.
I mean, I'm going to push back on that because I would say that pretty much the same happens here. You know, we asked to go on a trip with the Prime Minister or with the Chancellor, and sometimes, you get it, and sometimes they say, no, we're not doing you and we're doing other people. So it is always the people in power that decide whether we're allowed on those trips, right?
But it's never been that system in America. The pool system is completely different from anything that exists in the UK. If Keir Starmer goes out for dinner with his wife in the evening, with Vic somewhere, they go by themselves or their security detail. We now have, in America, they have a system where the president is accompanied wherever he goes by the pool, so that if anything happens, they are there to report on it. Yeah. And this dates back to kind of JFK and the assassination and all the rest of it, the idea that there have to be people there with the president the whole time. And it used to be the White House Correspondents Association, of which I was a member, who would decide amongst themselves, right, today there's the radio pool seat free. Can the BBC do it, or can Fox Radio do it, or, and we would get asked, we can do it, or we can't do it. Now it's going to be the White House who will decide. They become the gatekeepers of who has access to the president. And that is a significant change. And it's all part of a piece of what is happening in the US, where the number of legal writs that are being taken out by Trump and fellow supporters against media organisations, and media organisations being cowed into submission, is a very new environment. The fearless free press with the First Amendment protections is looking like it is running scared.
It's really interesting to see what happens now to the Associated Press, AP, which is like an agency. It's a wire service. They're about as neutral and as fact-based as it is possible to imagine. There's almost no colour in anything that they do. They just provide the facts. They were in the White House briefing room and they kept referring to the Gulf of Mexico, even though Trump said nominally he'd changed the name to the Gulf of America. They found themselves banned, and Elon Musk has now posted a picture of their motto, their logo, and called it AP Associated Propaganda. They won't care about that because they're kind of bigger than that. I think they believe in the integrity of what they actually do and what they have to keep on doing. But where does the money come from, and will it start drying up if they're not getting access to the stories that they need to cover?
I should add to this that, to their credit, the two most MAGA-loving networks, Fox News and Newsmax, have both come out and said it is wrong that the White House has banned the Associated Press from White House briefings. Of course,
because as a journalist, you don't want to be the stooge. You don't want to be the shill. It doesn't make you look good. It makes you look terrible.
And what happens in 4 years' time if the Democrats win the White House? Do all these other organisations get banned? You start a process that could come round and hit conservative-leaning papers as well. It is Donald Trump trying to control the media, to control the press. That is a really dangerous move that I would say puts this into the significant rather than the bullshit category.
He also doesn't really need to. I mean, Elon Musk's got Twitter.
Exactly.
I mean, what's the point?
We'll be back after another dizzying week next week. Bye-bye.
Bye for now.
The Newsagents USA.